Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started. Before we get into today's conversation, I just want to say this one feels super aligned with the season we've been walking through here on the podcast. Over the last few episodes, I've been talking a lot about confidence, calling, success, grief, rebuilding, and what happens when the life you built starts asking a different version of you to show up. And today's conversation with Annie Yatch meets us right there. Annie is a former counterterrorism analyst turned elite performance coach who works with high-level leaders, CEOs, and women who are carrying a lot. And what I loved about this conversation is that we didn't just talk about burnout from a surface level. We talked about what happens when you've been over functioning for so long that your body, your relationships, your business, and even your sense of self starts asking you to come back home to yourself. So if you've been in a season where you're tired of carrying it all, tired of doing more, tired of trying to hold the whole thing together, or wondering why the strategies that used to work don't seem to fit you anymore, I think this is the conversation that's going to meet you in the most honest and raw places. So with that, let's get into today's conversation with Annie Yatch. All right, so welcome back. And today we have with us Annie, and I am so excited for today's conversation. Before we get started, Annie, I would just love for you to share a little bit more with our listeners about how you got into this and just some of your backstory of where you are today.
Sure. So I'm Annie Yatch. I'm the CEO of Reinvention XO, and I'm the creator of The Authority Shift. And everything I've done in my life, now that I reflect back on it, was about helping leaders to stop carrying it all, right? Because most of us, we think we're burned out because we work too hard, but we're actually burned out because we're leading from our trauma, not from our true authority. And so I think it's been a long experience. It's gone from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, thinking I would work for the CIA, working for the Defense Intelligence Agency, working with the Navy SEALs, and then finally realizing I'm really here to do transformational work with people based on all that cool background. So that's where I am today. I'm all about helping powerful women reinvent themselves so that they can live a more simple, more honest, more, I would say, bigger life, but in a way it's bigger because of their alignment, not because of necessarily how much they're in the world, so to speak.
Oh, I love that. That hits home right away. Everything you just said was something that I have been doing some soul searching and deep reflective work on as well. And I have come to that conclusion that this is exactly the season that I've been in and the whole rebuilding, because those that have been listening have realized I've gone through some serious major life changes over this past year. And so when I had to pull the layers back and just get real, raw, and honest with myself, I realized that I was living for the world. I was doing what I thought I had to do. I was checking the boxes and hustling and grinding and chasing and all the things that were verbing, right? And I just felt so burned out and exhausted. And so I think that today's episode is really going to speak to the hearts and souls of our listeners, because if this is you on the other end, listen, tune in. And I highly recommend possibly even coming back to this episode to re-listen, because this is going to be a deep dive. When we talk about transformation, we talk about the heart of why are we here? And I think that's the biggest piece that we're going to uncover. So, Annie, I looked at you mentioned just about helping leaders stop carrying it all.
Yes. Because most people will come to me, right? I have a lot of clients that I work with, and when I work with them, they come to me because they've already tried every strategy. They've tried all the masterminds. They've tried hustle and grinding. They've tried all the productivity hacks, and they're basically still exhausted. And they're like, what is going on? Why can't my energy change? What is it about me that's holding me back from this? And so what I've learned and what I've noticed from 15 years of doing this is that most people are leading from this concept of anxiety over responsibility and these old trauma patterns. And they think if I just work harder or do more, all the verbing, then suddenly I'll be more successful. I'll have more, I'll have a better life. But it's actually the complete opposite. What I tell most people is I'm like, we actually have to go back and simplify and align ourselves differently, because you can't build a truly magnetic, incredible business from a negative fuel. You have to build it from a place that's very positive and connected and aligned.
Yeah, 1,000%. And to be honest, from this past year when I tragically lost my father, I was just in a season of just deep grief and loss and tragedy and trauma. And you looked at it from this place of, how am I going to get back on my feet? So I got to do more. I have to continue doing the same
Surviving.
routine, the same habits, the same everything, because it was just my body, my mind, my emotions, my whole well-being, my everything was just searching and scrambling for something to hold on to. And it just was searching for those things that it had once known. But those things aren't what would carry me forward into this new season. Because to be honest with you, I'm not the same person. I've come out a completely transformed, different person because I had to go through so much.
When you go through grief, it is the biggest resetter of life, I think. And I think that what you shared about what you went through, grief looks so different for so many of us. So I think that we always think, oh, let's reset with all of our routines. Let's reset with all the things that we think are our foundation. But more often than not, grief throws everything out the window. We really are forced to look at our beliefs, our thought patterns, and even things that we've been doing for years and be like, you know what? That's not fucking working right now. What else can I do? What else is there? And that's usually one of the biggest pivot points of your life, because you've realized all the programs and the structures that you thought were making it work for you actually aren't.
Yep. And that was a big revelation. I was just like, because I got to the sticking point and I was so frustrated with myself because I'm like, why is this not working? It's always worked. And I just kept doing more and more. And when we talk about, we see this in the online space a lot of this hustle, this grind, this burnout, right? I think what we're tackling here is this burnout from a place of complete and utter exhaustion and not from a place of, oh, I'm just tired of doing the same things in my business. There's a whole different misalignment there. And we see this from these driven women who I remember reading a post and she was like so anti burnout, like, oh, come on, you just suck it up and keep doing the things. And then there were some women that were commenting on this post and they're like, no, this is a whole deeper emotional nervous system regulation from trauma, burnout. This isn't about doing the same thing over and over and you're just burned out of whatever it is you're doing in your business.
No, it's something you can rest through.
Yeah, because you have to rest, you have to recover from this. And I think at this point, it's about the whole nervous system regulation. And then once you're regulated, you start to breathe again. And because it's a whole soulful rest versus just maybe I've been operating on 4 to 6 hours of sleep because that's what they say, grind until the sun comes up or whatever bro tactics are out there. And it's like, hey, listen, I bought into them. I did.
I did too. We both probably did for until we hit our 40s. And then we're like, this does not work. This is not sustainable. And let me tell you, girl, there are 2 hacks that I've discovered because I did not like what I was seeing from myself, right? I was pushing way too hard. I ran 3 companies, had 2 little kids. I serviced thousands of clients and I was so miserable. And I remember saying, I was like, there's got to be something better than this. That can't be how I live my life. But the 2 things I found out is like when we talk about nervous system, because everyone's talking about nervous system right now, it's not necessarily the nervous system. You can't fix it with breath work, right? What it is, our brains need a boost of healthy neurochemistry, right? Because when we're in fight or flight, that's what it's like when we're in survival mode, which is when we're letting our trauma patterns run us. When we're in the space of a calm nervous system, it's when we have enough serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine to stabilize us into a calm, centered feeling. And so I found a company about 7 years ago, and they very quickly, in a bioidentical way, so it's not the synthetic, but they help the body calm almost immediately. And so what I found is if you can do that and you can release the bigger emotional patterns that are running that subconscious, that combination of releasing the subconscious negative patterns and doing the work to boost the neurochemistry, that combination is what gets women to freedom in a whole different way where their life can be simple, but they can also be making a lot more money, which is what I think as women we would all prefer to have, right? We don't want to be stuck in the hustle and grind because that's just not who we are. Also, it's way too masculine.
Yeah, that's totally this whole masculine versus feminine. And I think that I don't know if this is maybe you, but I think I was so driven from this masculine because I grew up in a time where I was just told you don't need a man and always make your own money because you never know what could happen.
We probably had the same type of parents, right?
I had this scarcity, like I have to work, I have to do this, and I have to provide. And I became so driven. I became so masculine and so alpha that when it took time in my life to be like, I need to be cared for, I need to be loved. Like, how do I let my husband do that? How do I surrender? And so there's a lot of these pieces that I'm still shedding, still working through. But it's interesting because so many of our listeners have all said the same thing. They're like, yeah, that's where almost this feminist movement became about, where it's like this online part where we don't need a man, but yet we chose to have one. But it got me thinking about this drive, masculine versus the feminine, and what one always takes the dominant seat. And then when we're burned out, we have to ask ourselves, where have we been operating from?
And I think you're exactly right on that. I think that for women that are in relationships with men where the men are frustrating them, it's often because they don't think subconsciously their man can meet them with the same level of masculine, right? And so what you find is a lot of women that are not happy in their relationships right now, I know I was there, right? Is because you were always the masculine. You were driving everything. You were providing structure. You were providing focus. You were providing foundation. You were trying to run the show. And then we get upset when we can't feel the love and care from the man. It's because we have out masculined them. And so for a lot of women, I think what I'm noticing now is that we're all trying to get more in touch with this deep, playful, feminine side that's more flowy and more joyful. Because if we can get in touch with that, actually we magnetize and build more success in business. It's just different than what we've been conditioned.
And I think that's the hardest part is unconditioning to letting go. And you have been an expert in this about this whole overfunctioning, right? We've been overfunctioning in these identities and roles that aren't really ours to carry. So that goes back to you helping leaders stop carrying it all, because how are we trying to carry this all? We expect it all, to do it all, and do it so perfectly without a crack or a fracture in our foundation. And we're still supposed to show up online as these perfectly curated lives while running businesses and teams and family and home and all the things. And then if you can't, then there must be something wrong with you, because you got to go back to the basics, right? And it's just this faulty narrative, this lie. And it's just this BS blueprint that we've been sold. And we wonder, is it me or is it the system?
I think what we're all realizing is that we've been conditioned to believe a
Mhm.
story that just isn't true. And that when I work with women, I always tell them, I'm like, if you go to a conference and you feel like, gosh, I don't really fit in here, I'm not really the expert here, you create a whole story in a brief second that you aren't what you actually are. And so I think that what we're figuring out as women is that we have to go back to the simplicity of who we actually are without all the conditioning, without all the structures of this masculine dominated workforce. We get to actually look at our lives and ask ourselves, what would our ideal day look like? And how can we create success where we redefine success as it is an optimized daily experience that I sustain over time? Because that can be so simple and so beautiful and so powerful. And sometimes it's not about making more money, it's about being in more alignment as you do your gift to humanity. I've made all this money, I have structured my life a certain way, but they're like, I'm so exhausted all the time. And I'm like, that's because there's something way out of alignment between your subconscious and your conscious thought. Because the conscious only has 40 data points a second, the subconscious has 11 million every second. So there's a lot that's missed in translation between the subconscious and the conscious. And most women are in that limbo of trying to figure out, what am I missing that will resolve the exhaustion?
Yeah, we don't really think about all these thoughts that are coming at us and the ones we've already created for us. And then we wonder where there's a big disconnect. And it's not about the doing more, but what about more of the being more in tune, more aware, more aligned? And so when we could start understanding to be in that power of the presence, to really tap into what is and isn't working for us, who are we in the season? Who are we called to already be? And what are we equipped for that we can already set out to achieve in our lives, instead of trying to conform ourselves into these pre-made notions and stories and narratives and these little boxes that this is who we have to be, and we have to be successful. We have to build these 6, 7, 8, 9 figures. And I remember starting, it was like 6 figures was a goal, then it was 7, then it's 8, now we're pushing the 9, and there's this gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and you realize I'm never going to make it. So it exacerbates that anxiety, this hustle drive.
Correct.
You're in overdrive, you're burnout, exhaustion, and all of a sudden you're just crash and burn. You're just like down at the bottom. Now I got to start all over.
That's actually sometimes the best place to go. I got to tell you, I went through a divorce 4 years ago where almost everything was taken from me. I built 3 businesses because my ex-husband was the face of the businesses. He took everything with him and I had to start over from scratch. And let me tell you, there's nothing more intense or terrifying than starting over from scratch. But the one thing I promised myself was, I'm like, I will do this my way and I will do it differently. And I will do it from a place of my feminine being happy. Because if you think about it, most of us wake up in the morning and we hear that voice in our head being like, you have to do this and this. Here's your list. Get through your list, get through your list, right? That's the masculine. The feminine side is like, oh, I just want to snuggle in bed for like 10 more minutes. Where we mess it up as women is we don't listen to the feminine. We discard it because we're so used to listening to this masculine inside of us. So then if we start actually taking a moment and be like, okay, she wants to snuggle in bed for like 5 more minutes. Why don't I give that to her and see where the day goes? And so I've been playing this conversation in my head for many years because making sure the masculine and the feminine in my head work together and I can negotiate for both of them seems to give me a really great life where I'm much more balanced. Everyone's like, you're so happy, you have so much energy, all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's because it's a constant conversation of realigning myself to what is the core piece here that has to move me forward that is completely in alignment with who I am and what I want. And most of us, we can't even think of that because it takes so much effort just to meditate for 5 minutes. The brain won't stop because of the nervous system issue. So it's all linked up. All of this for women is linked up.
Okay, so I can totally relate to that because I just found myself this morning, my alarm went off, and usually I'm a 1, 2, sometimes 3 snoozer. Hey, it depends on the urgency of my day. Like,
Been
do I
there.
have to get up? But today I just found myself, I was like, I'm snuggling in bed. I just wanted some extra time. I was awake. I didn't have to be physically on my 2 feet to go out and do things. And I woke up and I felt more kind of chipper in a sense because I gave those few moments to myself without even realizing it. So these are certain things that for me, I was just trying to switch up some of my morning routines, my patterns, and finding a new system that works for me in this new season I'm in. And so when we talk about this nervous system, and you mentioned previously about this calm center feeling and this thing that can almost calm the body immediately. What is that, and how can we tap into that really to expedite this process? Because when we're stuck in this burnout, it adds more frustration to the delay.
Yes. So I think that the way that we can address it is I went searching for 15 years, trying to figure out, is it breath work? Is it like, how do I calm myself? And I tried so many different things. And if you stack a bunch of these things, it helps, but then you also feel like you're stacking a bunch of things, which feels masculine. So about, gosh, maybe 7 years ago now, I walked into this event and it was a very bro event. Okay. So I walked into this event. On one side of the room were all these men that I could feel the trauma pattern coming out of their skin. And across the way was this woman in a muumuu that had the best, most amazing energy I've ever seen. I'm like, I'm going to walk over to that woman and figure out what she's got. So I was like, I don't know what you're on. I don't know what you're doing, but your energy is out of control. I'm like, how do I get that energy? Because my energy is done. I can fake it, but I couldn't feel the energy that I now have. Turns out her company was the company that the movie Limitless is based off of. And what it does is it allows your brain to expand because it calms the neurotransmitters, it calms the body's ability to get out of fight or flight. And so I remember laughing and being like, whatever you have, I want to try it. And I'll never forget when I first sprayed some of this stuff in my mouth. I had 3 businesses. I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old and an ex-husband who was going through massive chronic pain issues. So as you can probably imagine, there was not a lot of free time. I never was able to floss my teeth. And this sounds so small, but when she gave me these things and I tried them to calm the system, all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to start flossing my teeth. I'm going to start working out more. I'm going to start sleeping in if I want to sleep in. And my now ex-husband looked at me and he's like, you are happy. You are on fire. You have energy. He's like, what are you taking? I'm like, oh, it's just these sprays. I don't really know what's in them, but I think they're pretty great. He starts stealing my sprays. And I only say this because it was so instantaneous that my body wanted to start taking care of itself in a whole new way. I never would have believed it if I hadn't tried it. But now I use that to help all the women I work with because we don't have time to do 15 different breath exercises. We need something right now that helps us take it from 100 down to 50 so we can show up in a calm way for ourselves and our families. At least that's how it feels to me. I'm like, something quick, easy, bioidentical that our bodies recognize as their own. That's what we want. We don't want to be taking supplements and doing all these things and trying to optimize and biohack. It's so much.
And to your point, it just adds more to the plate. And when you're barely holding the plates, I always have this analogy. It's like you're the circus act where you got all these stacks of plates on the spindle and they're spinning like a top. And then all of a sudden, somebody just puts one right on the top and they all come crashing down.
We don't need to put more on our plates, ladies.
No.
That's not the point. It's what I need to do is take stuff off, start over, and build the plate that works for me.
And that's, I think, when we're just at this place, for me, I have this little persona in my mind that I always call myself the over girl. I'm just over it. I'm overworked, overstressed, overwhelmed, I'm just over it. And so you get to that point, and I think that was almost like this breaking point for me, especially when I was trying to pick up these pieces after I felt like my life just shattered. And I'm like thinking, okay, what ones do I want to intentionally pick up and bring into this new season? And what ones do I kind of want to push to the side and I'll reevaluate later? And then there was a whole mess. I was just like, I'm not even touching that mess. Right. That one's just over there. And so when I dropped that stack of plates for the metaphorical visual, I was just left with these shards and these pieces. And so this is where I'm very cautious about what I'm bringing into this new life, this new season. And there are some that I picked up and I was like, oh, that one's sharp and
We're very
shards are kind of,
selective.
well, now it's just like, okay, throw that one back down. You should get to intentionally pick and choose. And so to your point about starting over, starting at bottom, it's a great place to be. And you're never starting over from zero.
Never. You have all the wisdom.
years,
Yeah.
wisdom, experience, lessons, all the things you get to pick and choose to bring into the season. So those that are listening, listen, you're not late,
Never.
behind, you're not too old, you're not too whatever limiting belief.
Not
you're
too
telling
much.
yourself. And so I know, Annie, you talk a lot about these limitations and the beliefs. So I'd love for you to unpack some of those that obviously we have and have not touched upon, but what is something where this woman is in her season?
I think what I've begun to realize from a lot of the women that I've been coaching is that you get really stuck in this season of worrying about not what everybody thinks, but you're worried that if I don't do this thing, how is it going to impact my kids? Are they going to have to go through the same stuff that I went through? And I think the one beautiful thing about women that I've realized over time is that we are not always willing to invest in ourselves to do the work for ourselves, but we will sure as heck invest in ourselves so that we don't recreate it with our kids. And so some of these limiting beliefs, like some women are like, if I don't have a man in my life, then I'm not deserving of success. That's one that I've heard quite a bit recently. And it's not a conscious belief, right? It's a subconscious belief in those 11 million data points that grew from when they were between the age of 7 and 10. So a lot of what I'm doing with women when I work with them is I'm trying to find what is this limiting belief that you had from when you were between the ages 7 and 10 that completely redirected how you do your relationships and how you do your business. Because we have to release those negative lies in order for us to figure out who are you actually and what do you actually stand for and when are you in the most alignment. So it's a lot about sloughing off these stories that most women don't even know they hold. It's all subconscious, right? If 11 million data points every second are telling you this is the way you should be, you're going to believe it unless there's a massive pattern interrupt. So that's what I try, that massive pattern interrupt.
Right. And sometimes the massive pattern interrupt is one where your whole world gets shook.
It's a loss of a job, right? Sometimes it's loss of a parent. Sometimes it's even a loss of a child. You don't know what it is. But when it happens, if you haven't done that work, you sure as shit are going to have to do the work then, unfortunately or fortunately. But I believe it's all a journey.
And I think the biggest loss of it all is the loss of the identity of who we thought we were because it doesn't match with the season that we're in. And I think that's the rebuild, the reinvention. That's the turning point of everything in our life, because when something has been taken from you, you realized that you got to start over in some dimension of some area of your life. And you might not have lost something tangible, but there's a piece of you, which is the big disconnect. And you feel there's this absence, this void. And you're like, then who am I now? And I think that's the perfect place to begin. You get to reinvent that.
It's more fun to reinvent, I gotta say. I read this myth about the eagle. Do you mind if I share this myth?
Sure, absolutely.
When I heard it, it spoke deeply to my soul. I heard that there's a myth about eagles that when eagles get to be 40 years old, their beak becomes brittle, their talons get a little bit too dull, their feathers start to fly out. And so this eagle flies to the highest mountaintop. It smashes its beak against a rock so a new one can grow in its place. It pulls out its feathers so new ones can grow. And it pulls out the talons that new, sharper ones can grow so it can literally survive and thrive and soar for the next 30 years. And I was like, oh my God, how many of us as women have gone through something in our 40s that has completely debilitated us, taken us out of the game, and we've been forced to look at, oh my God, who am I? What am I doing? What have I been doing? And where do I really want my energy to go? So I love that eagle myth because it symbolizes this reinvention cycle. Yeah, reinvention is coming for all of us. But you don't have to do it alone. It doesn't have to be miserable. It can actually be really fun and really quick, which I think is something that we all, when we're in it, we're like, oh my God, this is going to be so hard, so painful. No, it gets to be quicker than you think and more fun than you think.
Oh, I love that analogy. That's a perfect reinvention story right there because it's you realize you have to do something about it.
You
You
have to do something.
you can't just stay knocked down. And as much as it is, and I always give grace, and I'm just like, let yourself feel the feels,
Yep,
but
yep,
you have to get up.
yes.
So that story that you are recreating for yourself, you are the author, the creator, the producer, the star, the everything in this story. You're not about what happened to you, but how can you transform that and leverage it for your purpose in this new season of becoming? And this becoming is a constant evolution of growth, of identity, of faith, of courage, of confidence, of resiliency. Because once you're down, there's nowhere else to go. But you can just lay there, have a pity party, feel sorry for yourself, feel the feels, but you do have to get up and keep moving forward. And so sometimes when you have the weight of these responsibilities of life to carry it all, there are some seasons where you're just going to have to temporarily place something down because it can't carry with you right now. You have to get the strength, the fortitude to continue forward and then come back when you're recovered or rested in a place of soul deep restoration to then pick that up and carry it again. But when we look at it from this metaphor of carrying this weighted backpack, sometimes we just have to take some of the weights out just to get there. And you realize you're strengthening yourself through this journey. And then you go back and go pick it up. And then you're stronger because of the endurance. So I absolutely love that. That's such a beautiful depiction of women, just especially when we're in this midlife, because we feel like we can't have any of the hair falling out or the nails not looking good, or we still got to be on, right?
Sometimes we tell ourselves that. It was really funny. I had a conversation with the gentleman I was dating, and I'm like, "Do you guys really care about the nails and the eyelashes and all the things?" And he's like, "Absolutely not." He's like, "It's your butt or it's your boobs, right? That's all the guys are caring about." I just remember thinking, I'm like, you know what? I'm only gonna do things moving forward that are just for me. I'm not do I love getting my nails done because I like it when I'm on stage and my nails look great for pictures, but I would never get my nails done for what anybody else thinks. And so I've used that now as a filter because I'm like, if I really love it, I'm going to do it. If I don't, it goes in the discard pile. Right. And I think of us as women, as we look at this midlife experience, not as a crisis, but as our massive turning point of figuring out exactly who we are, exactly what we want, and exactly what kind of life we want to lead. We find those things that are emotional deposits and give us joy. And if we work more of that into our day to day lives, life will get so much better. And I've been at the bottom. And I've also had to come back from being in the middle, and I'm coming back, going to a whole new level now because of the number of people that you can help, right? So I think after 40, it's more about, okay, we have to reinvent, we have to figure out who we actually are, and then we're going to battle some really big life changing moments. But if we know who we are as we go into those moments, it makes the moment more profound. Or we use that moment for massive transformation. Either way, this is your journey, this is your movie. And the more interesting you make it, and the more you accept, okay, if this is my reality, who are the players in my movie and why have I hired them? I always ask that. I'm like, why did you hire this person to bother you? Why did you hire that person to be your mom? Why did you hire that person to be your dad? It's because they're here to teach you a massive lesson that's going to propel you forward. So everybody always says, how can you get so excited about bad things that are happening to people? I'm like, because the bad thing that's happening is teaching you one of the most epic lessons of your life that you absolutely need right now in this moment, because it means the second you're done with that lesson, you're going to be on an upward trajectory for the rest of your life. It's pretty exciting.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that's the thing. It's like using what happened to you as this pivotal moment to transform and learn. And there's so much learning and growth opportunities. And for me, it was like, it's a silver lining because there's always something good to come out of a bad. There's always a
Always.
gain to come out of a loss. And when you're at rock bottom, and this, I've always said, like, I've been at rock bottom before, but this past year after tragically losing my father, I was just like, I didn't think you can get any lower than that. And I was like, I'm actually like beneath the rocks. And so this was the hardest climb out of this season. And it's like, everything that I look back on was like, okay, this is coming with me because it taught me this lesson. This was profound. This is impactful. This is where the wisdom is. This is where the silver line, like all this positive stuff that's come out of it. And you realize you, in this whole journey, you have become this more powerful, more confident, more radiant, just stronger, more courageous version that you never even gave yourself credit for because you didn't know that it was possible.
And you also didn't know that you had the kind of reserves that you
No. Yeah.
That's what I would love to offline maybe hear more about your story though, and to hear more about like how did you claw your way back up? Because I feel like for women, hearing the story of how women claw their way back up, like when you go through divorce, you cry all the time, whether you wanted the divorce or you don't. And like, how do you still build a business and service and help and support people when every day you're crying? I have so much love for women who have gone through divorce or for women who have lost children. I have quite a few people I've worked with in the past that have lost children, and that grief cycle is just intense, right? Towards clawing, it wouldn't matter to us, and we wouldn't have that level of care for ourselves. So it might feel like it's an overwhelming thing to claw your way up back up to the top after really big things that happen, but sometimes it's a simple, like for me, I know this sounds probably really dorky, but for me, I was like, I'm gonna eat raspberries whenever I want to eat raspberries because raspberries are like my favorite fruit. And during my divorce, I'm like, I'm gonna go and buy myself raspberries and get flowers and have them in my place every single week because I'm gonna do this for me. It sounds so simple, right? Maybe even a little cheesy, but that was how I clawed my way out. I would look and stare at those flowers and be like, I got these for myself. And it feels beautiful and amazing. And somebody's thinking of me. So it's just little stuff like that that we have to find that really speaks to our souls. And I think we spend so much time in the earlier part of our life not speaking to our souls, not speaking to our hearts, doing the things we think we've been told, we've been conditioned to do. And that's why we end up much more masculine than we want to be.
And I think that's in these seasons, like you buying the flowers and the raspberries, it was you treating that feminine side of you. And you got to see this beauty and this whole embodiment of something that somebody loved you. And it was you. And it was almost like your own feminine being saying, we've been here this whole time. You haven't allowed the love and to come in place, but we're going to give it there because it's already been here. And especially the thing with your nails, it's like you found this tap into the feminine energy, letting go of the masculine drive and being open to what is possible when we let go and surrender to the things that aren't ours to carry, aren't ours to perform, aren't ours to perfect. And it's quite interesting how life will then come in and we can be like, oh my gosh, look, that thing just came knocking on my door. It's like, no, that door that had been sitting outside your door the whole time, but you have been purposely
Love
driving past that and locking it because you didn't think it was for you. You didn't possibly think that you were worthy of it, or you didn't love you love the outcome better than the receiving of the outcome. There's a whole different aspect of it. And I'm finding myself in this receiving. It's challenging because I'm such a doer by
Yeah,
trade.
oh, I know, lady. Like most of us as women, we've had
Yeah.
a lot of problems receiving. It's easier for me to receive when I have thought about, I know for a fact I'm the love of my life. That realization, I'm like, I can receive now so much better from myself sometimes than I even can from other people. But I feel like that's somewhat of the key to this receiving piece. I used to never be able to receive from anybody. And then I worked on this receiving from me and it got so much easier. But it is hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done is to say yes to receiving. Because that means you're saying yes to being the receptacle, yes to accepting, yes to moving with the flow of that energy. And going from masculine to that is a big difference. Big difference.
Because it's almost like you have to let your guard down and be cared for and loved when you've only known an output of doing that for others. And yeah, I'm in that same season. And it's so hard.
And there's a book called It's Not Your Money and Change Me Prayers by Tasha Silver. That was the book that helped open up my whole ability to receive. It's called the Change Me Prayers one. You read one page probably every day, but it just switches your brain to be more open to that receiving and to be like more open to asking for what you want and asking for what you need. It's one of the most beautiful books that I have the women that I coach work with because it's the quickest way to reset some of the subconscious thought patterns that we have.
Have to check that one out for sure. And it's like, for me, when I found myself, this is like, I always feel like a reinvention. There's something always that happens, and that's okay. Maybe that's like the 1.0, and this is like the 2.0. But pulling from some of the things, because like when you're at this bottom, you're like, okay, this worked before. Let's give it a try and we'll bring it in. I found myself in a very similar pattern before where I would constantly just give. And then when I was on the receiving end, it felt so awkward. I would shut it down because I didn't know how to receive. Because I was like, wait, I thought I had to earn something or give something or do something in order for that transaction to take place. And I remember on the receiving end of something, it was like a compliment. And I remember coming home after receiving it and I sat with it and I was like, why does this feel so weird? And my subconscious has said, because you don't know what it's like for you to receive that because you don't see yourself the way other people see you. And I was like, oh, so how do other people see you? And I realized it was this narrative and the stories that I've been telling myself where the perception of what I believe is what I think that other people see and believe is
Filter,
right.
right?
So I'm in this receiving place now, and it's been a challenge because I'm such a natural just doer, giver, like I said. So it's work in progress. We're still there, but
I got a little
something that I'm
technique.
aware of.
If you
But
want a little technique that you can share with people listening, I always think of it now as a fair exchange. I am not going to overgive anymore. I'm going to hit my ball over the net. And if the person hits the ball back to me, then we're in a back and forth connection, and then it's fair exchange. If it feels like I'm constantly hitting the ball over the net and nothing's happening, that is not the type of relationship or experience I want to have in my life anymore. Well, it's not transactionary. It is the energy has to be the same coming from both parties.
yeah, and that makes sense because I found myself just keep serving and serving, and I'm like, they're not even passing the bat.
You learn really quickly. You learn really quickly who your true friends are and who the true people are that are there for you. And it can feel very lonely sometimes, right? But I think for me, I don't know if you've ever read the book The Power, but The Power, I love the concept that the more unconditional love you pour energetically into people, the more that energy can come back at you. And I was really looking to, I'm like, okay, I'm going to pour a lot of energetic love into people. I'm not going to overgive or overdo or over sacrifice because self sacrifice never works. But I will pour unconditional love into people without expecting anything and see what happens. And that's what made it also easier to receive. Because I'd get these beautiful unconditional love frequencies and be like, I'm going to do this because it feels really good to me. I don't care what anybody else does. And then you get surprised because you end up receiving more and more.
That's a really good tip because it's, again, bringing yourself back to this level of awareness so that you are in a sense of control because you're now overseeing what is and what's happening and how is it working. But I love that. And it's going back to something we talked about just earlier is how this drive essentially is killing what we had initially set out to achieve. And I thought that was interesting. Again, when you're at this bottom, you start to see things so differently. And in this online space, we're in this drive from this masculine and this feminine, how we're almost told that we have to have these outcomes and expectations that just are not realistic for us to, one, may not fit us entirely of who we are, but let alone sustain. And I think that it's almost a season of giving ourselves permission to reevaluate our lives, our businesses, and recognizing that what does it mean? Again, you mentioned this too, and I talk about this a lot on the podcast as well as in our newsletter. But what it is to redefine success. We get to redefine everything in our lives, especially when we find ourselves at these crossroads of maybe that I don't want to continue on that path anymore. What has it cost me? It's exhausting, or it doesn't align, or it feels like this constant tension or this disappointment, disconnect. And now I'm forced to go down that way, or I could choose the road less traveled, which I love Robert Frost's poem. And it's a beautiful, again, analogy because what is down that other path? Because it's got to outweigh what we currently have right now because something's got to be better than what we got now. So what if we ventured? What if we had the courage to go down that path? And I think that for many of us in this redefining or rebuilding season, we're faced with those two choices. And I think for me is I don't want this life that is curated what we see online. I don't need or want 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 figure businesses. I just want a very simple life. And I've always just wanted that. And I think when you're in this online space, there's so much pressure on you to produce, perform, and perfect, especially when you're trying to build your business or build what they call this personal brand. But what if you don't want to be a personal brand? You just want to be a person behind the brand. You just want to be a
Yeah,
person without
that's it.
performance. Yeah.
I think we're leaving a performance era and we're
Mhm.
walking into authority instead. The authority where we can say what we want, we can ask for what we need, and for some reason, the path will be cleared for us. I think when you said that the drive kills what we actually want to receive, I think that was so honest and very clear because what I find is that the drive actually kills the gift that you're here to give to humanity. So when you think about your life, if you look at any area where there is suffering, it means there's a lie in your subconscious that's holding you back from your next great thing. And so I spend a lot of time with anybody I coach being like, where's their suffering? And if it's a conflict with their parent or conflict with a spouse or a conflict with a team member, I'm like, they're always all linked because it all goes back to the story your subconscious is telling you that is no longer true, but you're still playing out over and over again. So we all get stuck, but it's next to impossible to find the pattern in your own subconscious. That's why I think we're all lucky that even in the online space and digital marketing age, we have coaches that are really good.
Yeah, and it feels hard to trust in that space because you don't know the intention behind it now. And I think for me being in this online space for almost 19 plus years, it's hard to you don't really know the authentic side of things. And I think that's been a lot of flags raised in these spaces where, like you said, people want now transparency and authenticity and this authority leadership because there's so many that have just been sold this marketing blueprint and told how to market, but yet there's no personal piece behind it.
I know what you're saying.
I'm trying to be a little bit cautious on my words too, because I listen, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot in this online space, and it's just hard now being like a voice in this echo chamber. Because how do you stand out? How do you differentiate yourself? But coming from this place of truly, genuinely wanting to help people that have been burned by so many others out there, right?
I think about that often because I could tell you I've probably burned hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in my driveway with different coaching programs that promise one thing and never deliver. That's like one of the hardest people to ever get into a coaching program because I'm just like, listen, I've tried this and this. How are you different from this? Right. And so I think that I think all that I've realized up until this point is you really have to go off of your gut in so many situations, but only if your gut has done the work. Because if
Mhm.
not, choose the same old pattern and you're going to choose people in that digital marketing space that prove the story that you want to be true. Our ability to make and filter decisions, I think, is one of the most beautiful parts of who we all are. And when we're more aligned, we can make and filter decisions at a much higher level. So I would agree with you. I think that we're reaching a point where our discerning ability is going to be called on for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that brings this episode almost to a full closure when we talk about that, because it goes back to the trauma, the nervous system, the regulation. So we can't continue to show up and make these decisions without actually healing what is already damaged from the lives that we've lived. And so if we find ourselves in a place where it's like we're burned out or have been burned by coaches, we have to assess that problem. What initiated you to reach out to a coach in the first place? Where were you struggling then? Is that same struggle popping up in the season that you're in all these years later? Or what happened to that course that was promised this guaranteed outcome? How's
What
it
part of you
different
did
than the
aspect of the course, right?
right?
That's what I've realized even about myself. I'm like, oh, those early courses I purchased, I didn't show up as my authentic self because I didn't know who I was. And
Right.
so how can you then try to be authentically yourself in front of the camera? Everyone always says to me, they're like, you're so fun and your Instagram is so serious. And I'm like, yeah, because you don't get the fun and the excitement unless you're like one-on-one with me, right? Like, but that's an interesting piece too, right? How do we make sure that the external portrait of ourselves is exactly the same as the internal and who we truly are? I think that's the journey we're all on through our entire lifetimes.
Right. And I think that shows up what we're all craving now is just be you, be honest, be raw, be who you are created to be. And this version just showing up as this messy, real, raw, in the middle of the messy middle individual. And so that's okay because people can relate to you at different phases and stages of your journey. That if you're in a place to truly help somebody, you're only needing to help somebody that's just even a step or two behind. You don't have to be the expert, but
Yep.
this online space has presented you have to be polished and perfected because then you want to be taken serious. No, I just want to be relatable to if I'm going to hire somebody, I want them to know that they struggled just as much as I did.
Exactly. For me, it's do I want that level of energy of that person? Do I want the level of relationships that they have? Do I want that level of connection with their kids that they have? Because we often choose coaches that aren't the reflection of who we want to become. And I think that's the piece that we have to think about more is if that's the reflection of who we want to come, then by all means jump onto that course or jump into that thing. But I think most people go into it because they're trying to solve a problem. They're not looking at, does this person accurately represent who I'm becoming?
Yeah. Yep. And then also that discernment filter because people live a public versus private life and you don't know which one is which. And they're going to sell you the one you want to be sold, but you don't know who they are behind the scenes, behind the camera, behind the filters. And I think that is important because then that's where the true individual shows. So when you buy past these paywalls, are they truly the same person that promised you this outcome? So Again, a
That's
lot of
often the
discernment.
marketing. You've seen that, right? Like, the way
Oh,
they
yeah.
make money is not the way they're making money.
They're all selling you the same regurgitated marketing ploy because marketing, they want to sell you something very sexy because sexy sells. If they told you about the real struggle, the real life, the trauma, the drama, all the stuff that's happened, you're going to be like, dang, I don't want that. Of course you don't want it because you're living it right now, but at least they're being honest about it. But don't you want somebody who's honest about it because they've actually lived it and now they found a way through it versus selling you the jets and the Ferraris kind of stuff. And you're over here like, I can barely pay my car payment on my 20-year-old car or whatever it is. So it's like, you just, again, discernment, filter, understanding who you are, getting to the root of what traumatized you, calming in that central nervous system so that you can start to move forward from a place of, again, discernment. Yep. But knowing what you want on the other side, what is the outcome and who's going to help you get there faster so that you don't have to make these same mistakes and trip over the same things and fumble your way forward and feel discouraged, because it's all about life. It's just like this journey, we've never arrived, but there's people there along this journey that are willing to help you, but you have to make sure you know where you're going because they're going to lead you astray to somewhere else. You're not cautious about where it
But
is.
remember though, Rachel, most people have no idea where they're going.
I know that.
Conscious brain, the brain of the 7 to 10-year-old, is driving the bus 24/7, 97% of the time. That's why, like, when people tell me they don't know where they're going and they bought all these coaching programs because they weren't sure, I'm like, that makes sense because your subconscious brain of the 7 to 10-year-old has been running you this whole time. But once you calm that 7 to 10-year-old down in the subconscious, then they can actually make different decisions, and the decisions they make will propel them forward into business, and they will choose very differently than where they would have started off. Like, I have one gentleman I coached. He was at 24 million. He couldn't make more than 24 million. I know that's a huge number, right? But like, he literally came to me, he's like, how do I do this? But I want to work at least 30% less. I was like, let's see how this goes. I'm like, I may not have all the answers, but let's see. A year later, he's at 50 million now, and he worked 40% less because we tracked it. And it's like, what I'm realizing with almost everybody is you cannot make good decisions for yourself if the 7 to 10-year-old is still pissed at you and running your subconscious thought. Even if you go through these big, pivotal, groundbreaking moments in life, it's very hard to see your own subconscious. Most of us can't. But then when we do, we're like, oh my God, what have I been doing to myself? So that's the one thing. If your subconscious is running you and your nervous system is hijacked, then how in the world are you supposed to make the right decisions for yourself to create the simple, loving, fulfilled life that you want?
And that's where a lot of that healing comes in.
Yeah.
Yep. So before we close out, I'd love for you to share with our listeners how they can learn more about you and just stay connected and just what we've talked about on today's episode and just ways of figuring out where they are in their journey and pieces to connect with you.
What I try to do every month is I do a win-win call. It's called Win in the Boardroom, Win in the Bedroom, and it's a free call that anybody can jump on. I have a lot of past clients, current clients, alumni that will jump on, just get some extra support. So if you've got a question, you don't know if your subconscious is running you or not, you can register for that. I'll make sure I include the link for you, Rachel, there. And then I have an energy leak quiz that I let people run through just because I feel like if you can sense where your energy is leaking, you can very quickly figure out where's your subconscious causing you trouble. And that's a big ball of wax that once we unravel that, life gets a lot more clear and easy. That way, it's one thing they're both totally free, but I feel like it just depends on what you want. If you want to be with live support or if you want to have something to amplify that subconscious, you have both in a package.
Awesome. So of course, those links will be in the show notes below. So be sure to click those and jump on these calls. Take advantage of what Annie has to offer. And you never know where it's going to lead you, but it's better than being stuck where you're at today. So thank you so much, Annie, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And you can always find me on Instagram as well, reinventionxo.annie.
Thank you. Before you go, I want to share something personal that I'm walking through in real time. I'm in a season of rebuilding my health, my habits, my body, my energy, and, well, honestly, my entire life from the inside out. After everything these last few months and really these last few years have carried, I knew I needed to stop waiting for some perfect moment to begin again and just start where I am. So this month, I'm doing my own reset. And it's definitely not coming from shame this time because I'm not trying to chase an old version of myself. But this time, it's really about listening to my body and soul again and supporting her after grief, stress, survival mode, disrupted routines, and all the things we don't always realize we're carrying until our bodies start speaking louder than our demanding schedules. That's why I'm going back to basics and getting fit from within. I'm prioritizing nutrition, hydration, movement, sleep, stress, gratitude, and self-love. And I'm using the tools and supplements I've been sharing right along as part of my own reset. And I'm inviting you to join me in this season where I'll be sharing more truth-telling stories, takeaways, and lessons learned as I go. And if you're curious about what I'm using, I'll keep the links in the show notes below. Again, this is just one part of the journey, me learning how to come back to myself with honesty, care, and a whole lot more grace than pressure. Together, we've got this. Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.